Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful veterinary practice and career. I'm Dr. Amanda Landis-Hanna, one of the co-hosts of the Veterinary Business Podcast. On this podcast, we bring you insights and expertise from industry-leading doctors, experts, and thought leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing, finance, leadership, HR, AI, law, and so much more. Whether you're a practicing veterinarian, a practice owner, a practice manager, or a student studying to be a veterinarian, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the unique challenges and opportunities that are available to you within the veterinary industry. Every listener on this podcast is welcome to visit www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools to support your growth. You can also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, YouTube Music, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, America's pet advocate, and my friend, Dr. Ernie Ward. He's an award-winning veterinarian, internationally renowned speaker, author, and impact entrepreneur. Dr. Ward founded the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention and co-hosts the Veterinary Viewfinder podcast. With multiple accolades, including Veterinary Journalist and Speaker of the Year, he's a leading voice in improving pet health and advancing veterinary medicine. Today, our topic is going to be 5 behaviors you need to lead your veterinary team. Dr. Ward, welcome to the show.
Oh gosh, Amanda, it's great to be with you, and I love what you're doing here because, again, our whole goal is to elevate our profession, and you're one of those folks that's doing it.
Thank you so much. What a flattering thing to say.
Well, it's true.
I've known you for years, so I know some of the behind the scenes of your really amazing career in life. But I was wondering, can you share a little bit, maybe a couple of thoughts around what motivates you and what are the things that you really enjoy in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, it's a great start, Amanda. And, I've been a veterinarian now for over almost 33 years. And so I graduated from the University of Georgia way back in the dark ages of 1992. And quite frankly, I started my practice within 14 months of graduation. So I've always been in this leadership, ownership role. And so it's kind of what I've only known. And to say that, how do you keep this enthusiasm and the flames burning,
Right.
all these years? I think that's really incumbent on the person to constantly challenge themselves. And so today I know we're going to talk about things you need to do as a leader if you want to lead folks, whether you're an owner, a manager, or just a support person, right? We all are leaders in our own capacity and we contribute to the greater good. But it's really about finding those things that you're passionate about, pursuing them relentlessly, and remaining curious. I think that when I look back over my career, the thing that has always kept me motivated is really trying to make something better. And I've kind of evolved and transformed and moved into different directions over time. But each time, as I kind of step off of one curve onto another, I found that, being a beginner, a newbie in something, and then relentlessly pursuing excellence in that domain until I achieve it, that's really what kind of fuels my fire.
I love it. Obviously, I very much feel the same way. I feel like I've reinvented myself so many times in this industry, and it's such a great place to be, such a great place to participate in the industry and help animals every day in whatever form that takes.
Yeah. And again, I think to be the most successful veterinary professional, you have to transcend just helping animals and realize that it's about helping people. And when you can kind of, connect both ends of the leash, as I like to say, then really you find it to be a much more meaningful and fulfilling profession.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about this. Why is focusing on others' needs before your own considered such a fundamental leadership trait, especially in that veterinary setting where emotions and workload and stress can run really high?
Yeah, I think that, too often, and again, I'm going to speak primarily to my veterinarian and veterinary technician colleagues out there. When we're in these positions where we have credentials and agree and a title often in front of our name, such as doctor, people look to us to determine how they should act. And so we are constantly leading by example. And I think that we forget that sometimes. We forget, oh, I'm an associate veterinarian, therefore I'm not a leader in my clinic. And we
Mm-hmm.
sort of behave in ways that we wouldn't want our team to do. And it's really easy to get caught up in the day to day, Amanda. I mean, they're complaining clients, they're difficult cases, right? They're employees that just aren't doing what they ought to do. And so it's very easy to sort of to devolve into gossip and to sort of allow yourself to put down that professional veneer, if you will. And then suddenly you wonder why everyone's behaving the same way around you. It's because you are leading by example. And when I talk about focusing on others, I mean that first of all, we've got to focus on ourselves, right? I mean, we've got to be happy and content and really confident in what we're doing. Now, that's a whole nother separate topic, and it's one that I think deserves a lot of exploration. But we then have to realize that everything we do in life should be of the benefit of others. And I know there's a lot of talk, and I'm one of the I'm credited with giving the first self-care wellness talk at NAVC, or now the VMX, way back in 2004, I think, as
Mm-hmm.
somebody recently brought this up. And you're right. I've been a person who is focused on taking care of myself, and really focusing on health and mental and emotional well-being. But at the same time, I'm doing this so that I can be a better steward of others. And so I think the best leaders recognize that they're kind of put here on this planet to help those around themselves. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's, this servant leadership concept, this selflessness. Like, I know it begins with taking care of ourselves and being, again, as healthy and capable as we can be. But I really, I feel fortunate to have led businesses and clinics, my own family. I really feel it's my responsibility, my duty and obligation to help better those around me. And
Mm-hmm.
this has led me into not just business, but I've dabbled in politics. I certainly do a lot with civic outreaches, in my community here, and I find that I'm happiest whenever I'm helping others. And I think that when I look at the people that are kind of my age and that are successful and I admire and look up to and respect, they seem to share that same trait. They focus on others above all else.
That's really awesome. Obviously, you are one of the people that I look up to and really admire. So, hearing you talk about it with such passion is really exciting to me. When we're talking about a veterinary clinic, very close quarters, very close knit, how could an aspiring leader avoid workplace gossip and maintain that
Yeah.
integrity, even when the tensions are really pretty high? People get stressed and frustrated. How do you avoid some of those negative behaviors and focus on what you can do?
Yeah, and that was I really appreciate that's a great follow up. That's what I was alluding to a moment ago. It's like in the hazy conflict ridden tension friction that we work in often, it's very easy to let those emotions come to the surface, boil over, and you just want to spew all over everybody, right? You want to vent, and that's a natural reaction. But as a leader, and again, I'm going to say, if you're a doctor, if you're an RVT out there, if you're a manager, again, you're being held to a different standard, like it or not, and people are looking up to you to say, this is how I should behave or act given the situation. So I really want to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to cross over into trash talking and gossiping and all of that. Because, when you start to cross these lines, then what you've really done is given permission for your team and your colleagues and your coworkers to do the same. And I
Hmm.
think that too often, whenever I go into clinics and at Vertical Vet, we have 2,100 clinics, and so I'm constantly getting questions from owners and managers around the country, and a lot of times it's about the culture, and they're disappointed, they're not happy, people aren't accountable, and they aren't doing their jobs, and their standards are falling, and so forth. And I usually start to try to turn that conversation inward, right? And I start
Hmm.
to say, let's talk about how you're behaving. How are you reacting and responding? How are you leading by example? And again, a lot of times I'll hear these little off the cuff comments where they're very derogatory towards a specific an individual or group in their clinics, and you realize, okay, this is a problem. They're actually blaming, they've crossed a line to me where they're saying, these people aren't even human in a way, right? I mean,
Oh, wow.
they'll,
Yeah.
they'll, they'll trash talk them. And I think that, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to be disappointed as a leader. It's, again, I think if you talk to folks that have worked with me and worked under me or for me over the years, you'll hear kind of a through line, and that is that he's a tough boss. He's demanding. He does not accept anything less than your best. But then again, he gives his best. He gives his all. And we
Yeah.
really have to kind of hold ourselves. So again, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to demand a lot. I'm going to do this civilly. I'm going to support, and I'm going to make sure that I'm upholding that same standard. And again, it sounds like a cliche. And I know that sometimes the younger generation, they're like, oh gosh, these are platitudes, but I'm telling you, they're cliches for a reason because there's truth in there. And, they stand the test of time. And I will tell you that if you as a leader, and again, I'm going to put us all in this, right? We're all in that vet clinic. We're all in some leadership capacity. We really need to respect each other, be civil to each other, and support each other. Trash talking and gossip is just destructive, disharmonious, and it really demeans and devalues those around you. And so if you want to uplift your culture and make it, really, quite frankly, just more fun, more,
Right.
enjoyable, then you've got
Hmm.
to start with yourself and saying, are my actions, are my deeds, are my words matching up with that? And if they're not, work on it.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you mentioned some of the generational divide. Obviously, in a vet hospital, you're in such close quarters that you really have to work together. So for those future leaders who really you need to speak up and step out,
Yeah.
for those individuals who may be a little bit more introverted, what are some of the effective ways to start stepping into leadership? Sort of that concept of owning your power. How do you do that without feeling uncomfortable or feeling like you're overstepping?
Right. And that's a really great point. So let's say that you're an associate veterinarian in a clinic, right? It can be corporate or independently owned, it does not matter. But you aspire to have more control and autonomy. You'd like to actually maybe develop some of your SOPs, right? You'd like to be somehow leading a team at some point. Maybe even you see yourself owning a business in the future. And so how do you start to develop those skills? Well, the first thing, as you mentioned, is, I'm all about speaking up and stepping out. In fact, that's one of the things in this article that I talk about. It's like whenever I've had associates or vet techs or even, great receptionists and assistants in my clinic, the people that kind of got promoted and really got my attention were those that were always, kind of volunteering. And this doesn't mean that you do it just to play the game. These were people who genuinely said, hey, here's a problem. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think I have a solution, or I'd like to work on a solution. And
Right.
and those are the people that, just always did better in life. And I kind of look back at some of those exceptional associates and vet techs that worked with me over the years and then have gone on to do great things, and be in very large businesses around the country, and in pharmaceuticals and diagnostics, in corporate practice and all that stuff. And I realized that every single one of those were those people that raised their hands, were those people that said, hey, Dr. Ward, can I talk to you about something? And then, you're like, wow, this is amazing. So again, if your instincts are saying something can be better in your clinic, trust them and then act on them. And so even if you're introverted, you're reticent to go out there and speak up because you feel like, what if I'm wrong? Or what if they don't want to hear it? Well, taking that chance is also a big indicator of leadership, right? Because I will tell you
Right.
this, and what people don't like to talk about, and my wife always gets angry when I talk about it, but for all of my successes, for every successful business venture I've been in, I can show you at least three that did not make it, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's that willingness to put yourself out there, to take a risk, to fail, to be embarrassed. That really is the separator right there. And so, if you're struggling with that, then we really want to work on, are we pursuing the right things? Because I will tell you this, like right now, I'm dealing with something in which I have encountered a year of frustration and setbacks and failures, right? So it's a long reaching project and it's just been hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. And that persistence and that belief that I'm doing the right thing is kind of what continues to propel me forward, right? So if I wasn't convinced in my mind that I was on the right track, I would have abandoned this years ago, right? And
Sure.
the fact is, there are many times in life when I've had to do that. I realize, wow, this really isn't the right time for me, or I'm just losing enthusiasm for this, and I abandon. I move on to something else. But when you feel like, wow, I really would like to one day own a vet clinic, or I really would like to lead a team or be in a more, leadership position, then you relentlessly pursue that. And that's really what
Mhm.
makes the difference in the long term.
Absolutely. I live in the world of startup. I live in the world of owning practices, having owned my own, and obviously you have as well. One of the big things that I find has been really beneficial in those sorts of spaces where you're kind of coming into that ownership, that idea around fail fast and then move on and then
Right.
do whatever you have to do to keep going, is emotional control. Obviously,
Right.
I am very open about sometimes my frustration, my anxieties around emotional control. So, talk to us a little bit about how emotional control can be challenging in those sorts of stressful or high stakes situations in veterinary practices. What tips do you have for veterinary professionals who want to keep their emotions well balanced and foster psychological safety for their team? How do they support the psychological welfare of everyone around them?
Yeah, there's a story I tell. It's true and it's old and it's good. And it goes like this. When I was about in fifth and sixth grade, my father, who's since passed on, he was an old school entrepreneur, right? This was a guy who didn't like, he was a CPA by training. He had worked for a few years with IBM during the NASA program, actually in Huntsville, Alabama, where I was born. But he hated that corporate mentality, right? My father was a maverick, an independent, he just wanted to be in control. He would rather fail on his own than succeed under someone else, right? That's just that kind of old school entrepreneur. And I got a
Yeah,
lot of that in
yeah.
my DNA, and I hope I pass it on to my kids as well. But anyway, so I'm fifth or sixth grade, and my father dumps on me a set of cassette tapes called uh, The Power of Positive Thinking, right? It was called Lead the
Yeah.
Field. So Lead the Field was from Norman Vincent Peale. And Norman Vincent Peale is kind of one of those OGs when it comes to this whole self-help world, right? So this probably was recorded in the 50s, maybe the early 60s. And my father had stumbled on it. Someone had given it to him. And so he had passed it on to me, these cassette tapes, which I still have to this day. And inside that, there was a little, like a little poster. It was a little, paper sheet of thick paper. And on it was written three lines: direct your thoughts, control your emotions, ordain your destiny. I still have that all over my office. I post that everywhere. It's kind of been a mantra for me. Now, at fifth and sixth grade, I was like, what the heck, Dad? This is stupid. I didn't get it. Yeah, he was trying, but it was just not the right time. Then I get to junior year. Actually, it was the summer after junior year of high school. And so, I'm now fully on. I've always wanted to be a vet, probably from around that time. And that may have been why my dad actually gave me that thing, because I was always talking about being a
Hmm.
vet since I was a little kid. And anyway, that summer, I'm really doing some hard thinking, like, what's it going to take? Like, this is a real deal. Like, I've got getting into vet school is hard. And my father said, hey, you ought to go listen to those tapes, which he had probably said countless times over the years.
Right.
But I did. That summer, I actually did. I listened to those tapes. And incidentally, I was working at a car wash. So the vet that I always worked with growing up, that particular summer just couldn't provide me with enough hours. And so, I had to find like a regular job to supplement, because I was saving up money to apply for college and all that stuff. And so I'm working at a car wash, and, I had a Walkman that I bought used from a
Back
buddy of
in the
mine.
day.
Yeah, the cassette Walkman, and I just listened to these tapes on repeat, right? And it was like how you would listen to podcasts today. And it started sinking in. And over the next several years, as I went to college and started applying to vet school and all that stuff, I kept revisiting them, which I still do to this day. I now have them, they're digitized, so I don't have to go back to the cassette players. But that direct your thoughts, control your emotions, ordain your destiny, that kind of sums up a lot of what Peale was trying to say and Lead the Field. And there's a lot more to that. In fact, one of the other prescient things that Norman Vincent Peale was saying back then was, he said, if you want to master anything, in this world. He goes, study it for an hour a day. I mean, he's so right. And I would apply that at periods in my life. I've realized that's actually the skill that kind of got me way ahead, was just being able to intensely focus on something new, analyze, synthesize, and then incorporate it into something. I feel I really credit my father, and of course, give me those tapes from Norman Vincent Peale. But that the emotional part of it is critical that you kind of touch on, because we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days. We've got to keep our emotions in check, or it will derail our thoughts. I mean, we then get trapped in these negative thinking loops and so forth, and then our destiny, as Peale would call it, but our desired outcome, as I would call it, it's gonna be altered, right? So if we can't focus our thoughts and we can't control our emotions, we do not get where we want to get. It's just that simple. Like, you have to have those in concert. So for me, I love the fact that we are entering into an era we talk about psychological safety, right? Because the fact is, many folks, especially, of my age, we kind of entered into a world that was controlled by boomer management. And, that was not fun at all.
Yeah.
It was really one of the reasons why I started my clinic immediately after vet school, was because I knew what was going on in the real world. And so if you can recognize that control of your emotions is critical, remaining positive and focused, being humble, right? And understand that you're going to fail. You may not always be the best. You may not always have the right ideas or whatever, but you realize that how we react to those settings is critical. And again, as I was mentioning, I think over the years, my kids probably, I think they've seen this. They've grown up. And my kids now, I mean, I've got one in law school and one about to graduate undergrad and starting her PhD. And
wow. I can't believe they're that old now.
I know, Amanda. You remember when they were little, I'm sure.
Yes.
but regardless, they've seen mom and dad overcome challenges and do it in a way that we didn't like fall apart and blow up. And, obviously we got angry at times and so forth. But, I think hopefully that has sunk in. And so you do need to be aware that people around you are watching how you handle conflict and failure, and then control your emotions. Because I'm telling you, if you can control your emotions, I would argue that you are 80% of the way to finding a more meaning in life, because it's when we just can constantly go from one extreme to the other, very, very happy, very, very sad, very, 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 enthusiastic and very, very, depressed. I mean, like, and again, I'm not saying if you have mental challenges, that's a whole, mental illness is real. And I'm just talking about in the general day to day, you've got to find that healthy way to say, you know what, I'm going to try to maintain it. It's like, I was talking to a group of vets not too long ago about a similar thing about, not overreacting in the workplace, because one of the managers apparently had thrown a fit and whatever. And I said, listen, this is a little bit like monitoring your blood sugar. Like, it's not healthy for you to go through these giant Samiji overswings where, suddenly, you've got 400 blood glucose down to 30, like, that's very unhealthy. But yet emotionally, that analogy applies. And so we really want to try to temper that, keep it moderated as much as possible, recognize that our emotional state does dictate and determine largely how our future life is. And I would say that I really go back to my father and trying to say, okay, that sucks, move on, and don't let it just sort of wrap me up. And I think that the other advantage of growing up like we did, which was not easy, with a father who was constantly trying new business ideas. I mean, as I've jokingly referred in my lectures, we had some Christmases where I got a new bike and other Christmases where it was just hard candy, right? And the reality is, it really taught me, number one, that life is going to have a series of ups and downs, and you do not win them all. And sometimes it sucks bad, but you get through it and you keep soldiering on. And your attitude towards that, I mean, I will say this, till the minute my dad died, he never was giving up. He was constantly looking to tomorrow. He was not looking back, I mean, he was taking lessons and moving forward, but he never slowed down. And honestly, that's really just kind of what I want to do. And the people that I admire, most in life, Amanda, are those people that are constantly just moving forward. I mean, I look at people like Mark Cushing, who is an attorney, a very famous attorney. He has reinvented himself multiple times. Obviously the last 20 years or so, he's really been in the animal health field. And so, when I look at people like him, who, he's in his 70s, and he is constantly pushing himself to learn more. Again, that relentless curiosity. I think that's what, when you talk about emotions, keep it positive, understand, give yourself time to process and grieve and so forth, but then let it go and move on.
Yeah. So for those of us, including myself, who sometimes, the swings of the day, the angry clients, the sick team members, those things can definitely swing
Sure.
our emotions, and we're talking here about keeping those emotions balanced. Do you have, I hate to use, tips and tricks, but are there things that you can think of outside of, say, for instance, professional therapy, or ways that you can in the hospital help to bring up a certain level of resilience? What do you use for resilience? What things have you found over time that have really helped to reestablish resilience once you do have sort of that bad day, the surgery that goes poorly, or unfortunately a patient dies when you weren't expecting it?
Right. And those are all real examples that we all have to deal with in medicine. And I'll tell you, for me, Amanda, I got lucky because early in my adult life, I discovered meditation. And for me, it really was a way to sort of shut down those negative thoughts, in a very formal fashion. And look, everybody has people do get bent out of shape on the actual, mechanics of it, like which type and how do you do it? And, oh, I can't just think for 5 minutes or whatever. Of course, right. Everybody does their own little thing, but what you're trying to do is teach your brain, your mind, even your body, like how to shut down from the world. Now, this is an important skill because when things are hitting you and you're losing control, you
Right.
now have some muscle memory, so to speak. You have the ability to say, okay, I can control this, right? And it's not that I go and meditate when things are going bad, but it's just that my brain and mind and body know that I can cope with this. Like I can start to relax into it and move, and try to really transcend it in many ways. But what do I do? Number one, I usually try to escape for a moment. And so like whenever I really feel like if I'm on the verge of losing control, this is when I'm going to step away. I might go to the bathroom. I might do something where I can get private, and I'm going to do
Yeah.
some breathing exercises. And people underestimate the power of deep breathing exercises. It's part of my meditation practice daily. And so, for me, this is just, again, a signal, a physiological signal that, Ernie, let's get some control here, right? And my body now has done it for so many years and decades that, it's like as soon as that first probably deep breath hits, I'm sure that there are changes in the brain that are happening with me because it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
okay, I know what to happen. So deep breathing is important, separation from the situation. The other thing is to realize that you are on stage. You are in the spotlight. And how you respond in that moment is a clear signal and a lesson to everyone around you that this is how you want them to behave as well. And I will tell you, holding myself to that standard has also helped me so many times because, I remember being early in my career. And I was struggling. Like we had a problem, a case that just had fallen apart and somebody had made a big mistake. And I remember in that moment catching myself and saying, you've got two options here. You can blow the F up here and just start screaming and yelling and throwing stuff and doing all that typical, screw it up, beat 'em up management mentality that we see in America, right? That's how I had been
Hmm.
taught. That's what, the boomers were doing ahead of me. No disrespect, but many of them were because that's how
Hmm.
they were taught. And so suddenly I realized that's one option. Or the second option is take a deep breath, say, hey, you know what, guys? All right, this is not ideal. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but right now we're going to work through this moment. And I took that second option, and you could just tell the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees.
Hmm.
Everybody became much more calm and assured. And we got through that dilemma, and it taught me so much. And I will tell you this, that power of feedback, like, when you go through these experiences and you overcome them successfully, you gain a superpower. And this is why I used to tell people that I love, I've always been drawn to endurance athletics, and I really like physical challenges. I've, been a certified personal trainer and a USAT triathlon coach, for since 2005. And so, but I like putting myself in difficult situations, because when you finish that first 5K or that first 10K or marathon or Ironman, right? Or when I go out and paddle in the ocean for 4 hours, where I can't see the land anymore, right? And I see sharks, and I come back, what it's done is it's instilled confidence in me that I can do hard things. And so I would encourage you, if you're listening today, to do hard things, like to deliberately, intentionally put yourself in safe situations, right? Let's face it, doing a marathon, it's fairly safe, unless you have pre-existing conditions, in which case, we need to find something else to do. But the reality is, when you overcome those hard challenges, then you have taught yourself that you can do hard things and you can overcome them. So again, getting back to that emotion, really developing that kind of countdown, deep breathing, close your eyes, go find a quiet spot for 5 minutes, take a walk outside, whatever it is that you do. I wouldn't recommend smoking or drinking or doing any drugs, but find something that's positive to help you cope through that. And then, once you do it a few times, Amanda, you suddenly realize, okay, I can do this. And it becomes less of an effort and more of a habit. It's just automatic. And I think that that's the one thing about getting older, is I realized that I don't behave and respond and react anything like I did when I was 35, right? I mean, I'm almost 58 now. And so I know that it is that crystallized intelligence that has allowed me to do this, because I've done it, I've succeeded in it, I've learned when I didn't do the right thing, and you just keep getting better. And that is the one thing, that if you can age intentionally, if you can mature progressively, then you're going to find every year you're just a little bit better at something. Now, some things you're going to get worse at. I'm not nearly as fast as I used to be. My strength isn't, it's close, but it's not what it was at 35. But I've gained so many other things.
Absolutely. I do want to pause here for just a moment and point out that another option is therapy, professional therapy, whether it's in group or private settings. There are also medications that, if you are dealing with overwhelming anxiety, you can certainly speak with your medical professionals about that. And sometimes you do need a change of pace. For me, one of the things that I did is cut back on my practice hours and really jumped into the world of startups. So
Right.
there's lots of opportunities. It's important that people recognize that there is no problem. There is nothing wrong with seeking professional help if you need it to deal with the day-to-day traumas. And certainly, from a personal level, that has helped me so much. And obviously, those are things that weren't necessarily readily available, or even considered permissible when I graduated from vet school in
Right.
2002. So the world has come such a long way, and I'm so hopeful for continued best practices and best efforts for the entire veterinary team. And certainly one of the things that also helped me was sort of being comfortable with feedback, taking this opportunity to provide open feedback when I was not, say, for instance, the owner of the practice, but maybe I was still a leader, maybe I was an associate. And for a lot of hospital managers, they really deal with sort of this culture of open feedback day in and day out. So for those team members and those leaders who want to create change, who want to be leaders, how can those individuals really feel more comfortable sharing ideas for improvement? Do you have any thoughts or strategies from your own practice that might be helpful to make feedback feel more constructive and more welcomed, and help to reduce some of that? We all feel a sense of fear, like, ooh, how is this going to be taken? How do you build confidence in providing feedback, knowing that it is helping everyone, not just yourself?
Yeah, that's great. And honestly, even on my website, I write a monthly newsletter for one of my companies, Vertical Vet. So if you're one of our Vertical Vet members, you already see these articles. But I do post some of the ones that we get a lot of activity around on my own personal website. So if you go to drernieward.com, you can find some. But a few months back, I did one on. Of course, we talk a lot about this, Amanda. Because from a
Hmm.
leadership perspective, from a practice ownership, and again, our members are independently owned clinics, so they often, they really need to understand how to do performance evaluations and give
Right.
constructive, feedback and so forth. And so we talk about feedback a lot. And one of the articles that really sparked a lot of discussion amongst our membership was one on how to learn from feedback. And so like I'd done like a series on how to deliver feedback and like performance evaluation. So I'd done all that. But we often realize that as leaders, and really even as associate veterinarians who want mentorship, we're lousy at actually being mentored or receiving any type of constructive feedback, right? And so I did a whole article on that on the truth hurts, but it can help. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
one of the things that I you realize quickly is that especially for a lot of folks, people are afraid to actually tell you, right? I mean,
Right.
you don't get good feedback because they think you might retaliate. They don't know
Right.
how you're going to respond. And getting back to that earlier discussion on controlling your emotions, they don't trust the system, as I used to say this, right? So they are like, I used to tell people in vet clinics back when 360 feedback. So this is where you would ask your employees to evaluate leadership. You say this is absolutely useless until your team trusts the system, because they're going to do one of two things, right? They're going to say, all right, I don't think they're going to do anything with this, so I'm just going to like check the boxes and move on. I'm not going to give it any thought. I'm not going to put any intention behind it. It's going to be just check boxes and move on, right? And that's
Hmm.
worthless. Or they fear that if I do tell you the truth, you're going to come back and retaliate on me. It's supposed
Right.
to be anonymous, but somehow they'll figure it out. And the reality is, again, you get these fake, fake platitudes and fake, encouragements. And you think, oh, I'm doing a great job. But really, they're just scared. So we have to recognize that as leaders, we have to solicit, actively ask people to give us feedback and then be willing to take it. And again, I think people view this feedback loop as sort of as saying, oh my gosh, it's just going to be so critical and hurtful and harmful. Most of the time, people just want to help you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I'm going to be very gracious about accepting feedback, right? And I think that the people that are the best leaders, the best business folks, the best veterinarians, the best whatever, they are the folks that are actively asking, and they have made it very safe to give that feedback to them, and then they act on it. Now, everything that people tell me, I don't have to agree with, and everything that people say I should do differently, I don't know that I will, but I am willing to, in a very nurturing fashion, say thank you for giving me that, right? And again,
Hmm.
it's just because I give you feedback, Amanda, doesn't mean you have to do it. And I think that's the other part of this equation, right? Just realize that's their perspective. Um, I would take it seriously, which I do,
Right.
but I'm going to make sure that you feel safe giving it. And again, when we talk about adopting a growth mindset, which I like, I love that term, and
Hmm.
I love lecturing about this. But when we talk about a growth mindset, you can only grow if you're getting feedback from other perspectives, because you can only grow yourself so much from what you see within yourself, right? So when I'm looking
Hmm.
in the mirror, I see one version of me, right? And that's limited. It's a two-dimensional vision of me, and it doesn't really capture everything about me. But that's all I know about Ernie Ward, is what I've seen on videotape, two-dimensional,
Right.
what I've seen in the mirror, and so forth, and how I view myself. But then when my wife, or when a trusted colleague or friend or family member says, hey, you did this, or I didn't like the way you said that, or whatever, that is valuable. In fact, I would say it's invaluable, because now I get to see someone else's perception. And Amanda, how I take that, and I used to say, there's really what people say is, no, that's not what I meant. No, you just misunderstood me. That's not what I was trying to do.
Hmm.
Really, you think I act that way? Because that's kind of how you act. Any of that stuff that you might say, which is a common defense, that's the easy knee jerk reaction. All that says is, you know what? Thanks, but you're wrong. I'm not doing it
Yeah.
anymore. And let me tell
Yeah.
you, they don't give you feedback in the future, right? And
Right.
so you have to make sure that you are actively asking it, and then saying, when they say, Ernie, I didn't like the way you treated me yesterday. Okay, let's explore that further. I'm sorry to hear that. I want to try to make sure that we have a good relationship, a cordial, supportive relationship. So let's go further with this, right? Now, at the end, I may not agree with them. I may think that, I'm right and they're wrong, but I'm going to make sure that they feel comfortable telling me this. And I think that's really the key, to be gracious, be thankful. Again, I always tell people, when I'm looking at feedback, I am curious to see what you think of me. Right. So that
Right.
curiosity, I know we've said curiosity now multiple times, but that does also help me out. I don't view this as you are out to hurt me or harm me or in any way, cause me pain. I say, most of the time, folks out there are trying to help you. Now, I had a vet not too long ago after one of these lectures say, "Oh, so I guess you're going to do everything they say on Yelp about you." No, 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 come on. Yeah, we all know they're trolls, and again, that's unsolicited. This is not someone I trust. So there's a lot to this equation, Amanda. Before I act on that feedback, and before I actually let it bother me, so to speak, because as someone who's been in the public eye for a long time, especially back in the television days of Animal Planet and Rachel Ray and all that. I mean, holy smokes, there's a
Right.
lot of feedback out there. And you have to really have a coping mechanism and a filter to not let this stuff bother you. But if Amanda calls me up and says, "Hey, Ernie, da 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 da, I didn't know if knew you come across that way or whatever," I'm going to say, you know what? I'm interested in hearing what a man has to say. I'm going to be grateful for what a man has to say. I'm going to evaluate if I'm going to change it, if I agree with her on that. And if so, I'm going to do it. But regardless, I'm going to say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Amanda, for pointing this out to me, because I always want to be better. And again, Amanda probably doesn't care a whole lot if I actually act on her information or not. But the fact is, she feels like, I should tell you. So again, I listen first, I decide later, but I always, always thank them, because I believe it's a gift.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's so great now that we have opportunities like executive coaches. We have opportunities like therapists, like life coaches that can help you process some of this feedback that might be difficult to stomach and yet can help improve your outlook and improve your way of life, as well as help improve everything from the front of the hospital all the way to the back of the hospital, especially when you're talking about leading your veterinary team. I'm just so excited, so grateful for your time today, Dr. Ward. Thank you for joining us and talking to us about 5 behaviors that you need to lead your veterinary team. We appreciate it so very much, myself and our listeners. Thank you so much.
Oh, I thank you for the opportunity. And more importantly, I thank you for your efforts and initiative at just trying to make the profession a little bit better, because you know what, Amanda, it takes a whole lot of those little efforts to add up to big change. And you're an important part.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that more than I can say, but I do want to also take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every listener, each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you, whether that's making small incremental changes or big leaps. If you do like our podcast, kindly share it with your colleagues and friends on social media. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Again, feel free to check out Dr. Ward's website. Ernie, can you remind me of what that website was?
You bet. Dr. Ernie Ward at drernieward.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Keep it short and sweet, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, until next time, listeners, keep striving for excellence and making a positive impact in the lives of your patients, pet parents, and again, as we talked about today, the entire veterinary team. I'm wishing you all an amazing week ahead.